thrilled to host and have Kate Sonka from Teach Access come to present our keynote for Digital Equity and Inclusion Week. And she has posted her slides in the chat. I will post again if more people come in. Feel free to ask questions in the chat. And at the end, we will have a Q&A. And thank you, Kate. She's going to introduce herself. So I'm going to turn it over to Kate.
Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning. This is Kate Sonka speaking. Welcome. I'm so thrilled to be here with you all who are here in the room, and those of you who might be watching later on the recording. I want to give a big thank you to Sam and the team at UMass for inviting me here for Digital Equity Week. I know there's been some really great sessions already, so I hope this is but one of many that you're able to enjoy this week. I will be going into presentation mode and sharing my screen here in a minute. I'll try to keep an eye on any things coming in on the chat, but Sam has agreed to help keep an eye out for that as well. And I have a couple of my team members here in the room who can also assist with links or something like that if needed. But with that being said, I encourage you all to ask questions throughout. Especially if you want clarity around something or need anything, please do give a shout. So I will go into screen share mode here. Alrighty, and Sam, can you see that okay?
Oops. Yes, we can see your screen.
Great. All right, let me minimize the window there. So welcome. Let me get my notes in order here. You are here to join me in talking about teaching accessibly and teaching accessibility, and how I'm going to make a case for both, and how maybe you've already been thinking in that space as well. So again, my name is Kate Sonka, and I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the executive director of Teach Access. And we'll be talking more about who we are and what we're doing if we're new to you. There we go. So just a quick agenda overview. So of course, we'll start with a hello and welcome. And then I have a few questions for us to explore together. So what are we even talking about today when we're talking about these things? Why should we teach accessibility and teach accessibly? How could we teach accessibility? And what now? So we get through this and then what's next? So the hello and welcome. I've already introduced myself a couple times here, but I have been working as the executive director at Teach Access full-time since August 2021. Prior to that, I was working part-time in this role, as well as being a full-time faculty member at Michigan State University. And with that being said, I appreciate all of you allowing me a little bit of grace today, as it's been a really hard week, trying to process what's been happening there, and what's going on with the community. So appreciate you all being supportive in this space as I work through this today. So the work that I was doing, both here at Teach Access, which is around teaching accessibility, and at MSU, which was around teaching accessibly, was all centered in these notions of how are we creating inclusive teaching and learning spaces. And so considering the ways that we are supporting educators, faculty, instructors, graduate students, those who are teaching, in creating inclusive learning spaces, as well as thinking about the ways that we're creating those learning spaces for our students. And so a lot of the work that I was doing at Michigan State was focused in areas of teaching accessibly. So thinking through what trainings, what support do our faculty need to be able to create these learning environments? What sorts of activities and opportunities can we create for our students so that they're able to learn some of this as well? There's a few things that I did while I was in my time at MSU. One of those was volunteer with Teach Access. That's kind of how I got into it. And my background is also in language acquisition, actually. My master's degree is in bilingual bicultural education. And so I've spent a lot of time thinking through this idea of inclusive spaces. In addition to that, in one of those strange little universe things, my parents are both educators at the Wisconsin School for the Blind. And so growing up, I really was able to just gain an understanding of what does it mean to have or to create these educational spaces and be able to support students. And so I didn't actively try to get into the family business, if you will, but it just, in a series of twists of fate, whatever you want to call it, I find myself here doing this work again. First, I want to apologize if you can hear one of my cats meowing very loudly in the background. I have the door shut, but he's very upset about that. So sorry if you can hear that. With all of that said, the experiences that I've had, I do also want to acknowledge my privilege in this space. As a white female, cisgender, I don't identify as having a disability. And so when I'm doing this work and being in these spaces, I keep that in my mind. I'm here doing this work as an ally and an advocate, but I'm not speaking for anyone in the disability community. I actively am listening all the time, ensuring that the work that we're doing is what the community actually is asking for or is looking for, not assuming what we're doing is what needs to happen. And also understanding that the disability community is not a monolith. So what we think might be right to teach or to do for someone with a disability isn't the same thing that the person next to them needs. And so really understanding that, we bring that to the work that we do at Teach Access as well. With that long introduction, I want to take a moment and just help us frame this space here, this virtual space. So the first thing is maybe more a reminder to myself today, just to breathe. I really do want this to feel comfortable for everybody. Feel free to ask questions throughout. I know that there's a lot going on in the world, so please take a breath when you need one. Be here with me. Move about as you need to. Of course, keeping video off, you're able to move around and no one knows, which is great. You can keep your video off. But if you do need to get up and move, please do. And then this last one I have up here on the screen is say the word. And any of you who are active in social media spaces, especially in the disability community, have probably seen the hashtag say the word. And this is all about using language, actual language to speak about disability, and not maybe some euphemisms. So you'll hear me say both disability or disabled people and people with disabilities. And if you're familiar with the conversation going on around identity first versus person first, that's a lot of what that's related to. When speaking about the disability community, we always want to use the language, whether identity first or person first, that an individual prefers. But when we don't know what it is that they prefer, sometimes we use these interchangeably. But I do want to call out that there is some nuance there in using person first versus identity first. And so since I'm not, so I'll just leave it at that. If you have more questions about what any of that means, if that's new to you, please feel free to reach out. I'm happy to share resources about that, but wanted to frame the space. All right, so let me take a drink of water here. So what are we even talking about today? Well, as part of Digital Equity Week here at UMass, of course, there's been many good conversations about accessibility and digital accessibility and disability. And we're talking about that today too. But really specifically, the session description for this session, the question was posed, why teaching accessibility to our students is as important as teaching accessibly. So what's the difference? If any of you are in the slide deck right now, you see that there's a little red squiggly line under the word accessibly because they think that's not a real word, but it's a thing. We talk about it in Teach Access. Our phrase that we use at Teach Access is that we are about teaching accessibility, not teaching accessibly. That doesn't mean that they're both not equally important. And I'll share my definitions about what these two sort of concepts are in a moment. But the reality is that they're not at odds with each other. They're not, two separate things and we keep them separate. There's a lot of overlap. And, as I've spent time today thinking through what to share with you all today and guide some conversation, I really was thinking back to a presentation I did in October at the WCET annual meeting. So I have an image up on the screen. I'm going to describe it really quickly. It's a picture of me, and sorry, it's a little fuzzy. Gotta love those phone pictures in the middle of a presentation. But it's me holding a microphone, talking with my hands, which I do. And same concept, teaching accessibly and teaching accessibility, a case for both, is at the top of a giant Venn diagram that is actually covering a door. And there were many doors in that room. So, in case of emergency, people would be able to escape. Plus, it was a piece of paper, so we could bust through it if we needed to. But it covers 2 doors, so it was huge. The biggest Venn diagram I've ever seen in my life. But essentially, what's happening here, there's some Post-it notes that we had participants start to try and tease this out. What might they think is exactly teaching accessibly? What do they think is teaching accessibility? And where is their overlap? And we used Post-it notes for those that wanted to use that. We also created a Miro board, M-I-R-O, a Miro board, which is a really interactive space where you can be brainstorming with people, sort of a digital Post-it note area. And so we provided both options for people, but then really tried to capture all of the feedback into that Miro board later. And as I was thinking about this talk today, I was like, all right, let me go back and look at that Miro board and see what we came up with. Because in this image on the left-hand side, and I can't remember now which syllable meant which, but one of them was about teaching accessibly, one was about teaching accessibility. It's like, what was in the center? What did this group of faculty and staff and administrators kind of identify? And there were a couple in there, but there's 2 specifically that I wanted to call out here for us that I think are perhaps the most pertinent, the most important to kind of point to. Oops, there we go. Oh, I skipped over. Whew, there we go. So the first, include people with disabilities in whatever you're doing. Perhaps many of you have heard the phrase, nothing about us without us. We should not be doing this work and should not be talking about what we're talking about if we are not including people with disabilities in this work. We should never be assuming what works or doesn't, just like you don't want someone to assume for you what you do or don't want. And so that was one that really is shared by both of these spaces, as well as start from the beginning and be proactive. So we don't want to either get to the end of creating our course content and realize, oh no, it's not accessible. And now I have to go back and do all of this work over again or add to it. And on the other side, as we're thinking about how we're preparing our students to go out into the workforce and find jobs and internships, how are we ensuring that they have some of these skills and knowledge so that as they are ready to start designing or developing products and services, they know that they need to include accessibility from the beginning, so that it isn't one of those add-on things at the end. And so these really spoke to me, and I'll call them out again a couple times throughout and come back to them again, because I really think it gets to the heart of both of these ideas. So now for my definitions, let me take another drink of water here. Actually, Sam, are there any questions in the chat since I'm paused right now?
There are no questions in the chat, just me posting links to your slide every time I see a new person come in.
Great, thank you so much, appreciate it. All right, some definitions, because while you might have a sense of what I mean, it's always good to be really clear about it. So up on the screen, I have sort of 2 columns of text. I will read it out. On the left-hand side, I have teaching accessibly. And a quick definition that I mean by that is, as instructors and faculty, you're taking action to make your learning materials and activities more accessible to your students. Some examples of these could be captions on videos, using the accessibility checker on your syllabus, that's built into Microsoft Word, for example, adding alt text or alternative text to your slide deck images. So those are actions you take as an instructor to teach in an accessible way, that you're doing things to make your learning materials and activities more accessible to your students. On the right-hand side of the screen, I have a column that says teaching accessibility. And the definition I have here is that you are teaching concepts and skills of digital accessibility and accessible design to your students. So you're teaching these concepts that you might be using on your very own materials, you're turning around and teaching them to your students. So examples of this is introducing them to the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, or WCAG, however you pronounce that acronym. Another could be testing their projects with assistive technology, or having them, I should say, learn how to test their projects and what they're creating in your class with assistive technology. Another one is teaching them how to write alt text. It's a skill that's learned, right? Understanding what's relevant, what's not, how long should it be, what's useful. So teaching students how to do that, among some other things, among many other things. I encourage you, if you feel like you want to contribute to any of these examples, feel free to drop them into the chat. We can review those maybe during Q&A, see what people came up with. All right. So now I think we're hopefully all on the same page here and what we're talking about. So the question is, why should we be doing this? Why should we teach accessibility and teach accessibly? I thought about putting some numbers and some statistics up on the screen after this, because those are usually helpful to kind of wrap our minds around. But instead, I thought we would just kind of talk through them. Plus, I suspect for some of you, you've seen them before, they're very familiar to you, but you might have seen with, for example, the World Health Organization estimates that up to 20% of the population has a disability in the world, or 1 billion people, 1 billion people in the world have a disability. Those are big numbers. I mean, that's maybe 1 in 5 people that have reported having a disability. A lot of people. We're talking about a lot of people. What we also know about those numbers is that there may be that they're self-reported, and there may be, and likely, undercounted. Because it's self-reported, it's whoever steps forward to say, I have a disability, I identify as having a disability. Again, I was kind of reflecting on a few things with this talk, and I was thinking about my time at Michigan State University, and I'm sure the statistics are different now. I've been out of there for a couple years, but as I recall at the time that I was there, the percentage of students who had identified and registered with the Disability Services Office there was in a single digit. So well under what these bigger statistics are saying. And we know that there's reasons, right? Students maybe don't identify as having a disability, or aren't aware yet, or haven't experienced it yet. There's stigma attached to it. They don't want to be seen or called out in a way different from their peers in the classroom, and so forth. So we know that there's sort of these questions around how many people actually have a disability, right? Which leads to the question of, why should I be teaching this? And it's not just higher ed. I'm going to share another thing here on the screen, and I will read this out. Up on the screen, I have the logo of the Valuable 500. I will explain who they are in a second. And a screenshot of a title from a press release that was released on January 18th, 2023. That says ESG and Disability Data White Paper launched by the Valuable 500 at World Economic Forum. What does all this mean? If you're not familiar with this organization, the Valuable 500 is a global global organization of more than 500 global companies, huge companies, that have come together and made a pledge and said, we want to be better about what we're doing in our own companies with regard to our employees who have disabilities, as well as our customers who have disabilities or clients who are using our products and services. And so this whole movement around the Valuable 500 has been going on. And in January, so just about a month ago, at the World Economic Forum in Switzerland, Caroline Casey, who's the CEO of the Valuable 500, announced this, that the Valuable 500 would be releasing this white paper that's specifically around how can we get better at collecting data about people with disabilities. Because sometimes we forget, or if it's not in front of us, or there's not data to point to, you think, I don't really, what is that? I don't know. So at that level, even not just in university spaces and higher ed, people are thinking about how do we get better at understanding our populations, understanding the people who work in our organizations. So, okay, we've talked about data a little bit. With kind of arriving at this idea that we probably don't really know or understand how many students are in our classes that have disabilities. We might know some, but there's probably a lot that we aren't aware of. So even if we don't know, quote, for sure, that there's a student with a disability in our class, does that mean that we shouldn't be teaching accessibly or teaching accessibility? If you answered no, kudos to you. We should be. I have an image up on the screen here that is maybe familiar to many of you at this point, but I will describe it as well. This is from the Microsoft Inclusive Design team. Take one drink of water here. And it's essentially a little chart or graph. And there's some little icons of people. There's 3 columns and 4 rows. And I will quickly read through what's in each of these so that you know, in case you can't see it where you're at. So the first column is permanent. I should note, these are all kind of demonstrating different types of disabilities. So the first column is permanent. The second column is temporary. And the third column is situational. And then the first row is touch. And so for permanent, they have a little icon, it says 1 arm. Temporary is arm injury, someone wearing a cast. Situational, a new parent, someone holding a baby. In the second row, which is C, permanent is blind. Temporary cataract, situational is distracted driver. In the third row, which is here, permanent is deaf. Temporary is ear infection, and situational is bartender. And the last row is speak. Permanent is nonverbal. Temporary is laryngitis, and situational is heavy accent. We could spend some time, really diving into the examples that are here and whether we think they're right or not. But just for the sake of time, what this chart is really demonstrating, we don't really have all the data and we aren't really sure who's in our classes, but any of us could develop a disability at any point. And that disability could be permanent, it could be temporary, it could be situational. And so when we start to wrap our minds around disability in this way and understanding that this isn't a minority group over there, that has nothing to do with what we're doing, it's all around us. And it might be us now or in the future. And if not us, it might be a friend or a family member. And so as we start to wrap our mind around this, we understand, hey, this is a thing that we should know about and a thing that we should be thinking about. How can we teach accessibly? How can we teach accessibility? Great. So what does that mean? Teaching accessibly, okay, we've arrived there. We're like, we get it. There's some students in our classes that we certainly either know or don't know, and that we could be doing some more to make those learning environments accessible. What about teaching accessibility though? What does that look like? Next up here, there's a little something that we in Teach Access like to refer to as the accessibility technology skills gap. And what is that? So there was a survey that was back in 2017 that was conducted by an organization called the Partnership on Employment and Accessible Technology, or PEAT for short, PEAT. And they surveyed 70 people, 70 respondents from the tech sector. And these are large organizations, big tech companies, Silicon Valley type tech companies. And of those respondents in that survey, 63% said current staff don't have necessary accessibility skills. So the staff within their organizations don't have the accessibility skills needed to do the work that the organization needs. And 60% also said it's, quote, difficult or very difficult to find candidates with the needed accessibility skills. So this was 2017, right? This is a lot of why Teach Access exists, because we want to address that. We want to close the skills gap. We want people to have these accessibility skills, and we want organizations to be able to find recent graduates and interns that have these skills. You might be thinking, great, this was a number of years ago. How are we doing? Where are we at with it? Well, lucky for all of you, you're getting a sneak preview at some preliminary data from a survey that we launched last fall, so 2022, to try and measure what's happening out there. And there's a few of my team on the call today who've been working really hard on this. And so thanks to them for getting some of this data pulled together that we could share today. Surprise, the accessibility skills gap still exists. Who knew? Here we are a few years later. We had 107 respondents this time, and it was beyond just the tech sector, technology sector. We had people coming from higher ed. We had advocacy and nonprofit people who were responding as well. And of these respondents, 52% said current staff have a little to no accessibility skills. 56% said it's difficult or very difficult to find candidates with these needed accessibility skills. And 74% said they have seen a significant to moderate increase in demand for employees with accessibility skills. So while the gap maybe is a tiny bit smaller, I mean, it's still over 50%, right? So it's still here. It's still something that we're trying to address, and something that we're working towards in Teach Access, as well as other places. There's also this recent State of the Student survey that Wiley just put out. In August 2022, they surveyed more than 5,200 students and 2,400 instructors across North America. They were exploring student success and thinking about what's impacting student success. There's a lot of text here again. I will read it out. In this survey, again, very fresh, very recent, 1/4 or a quarter of the students that responded suggested that lessons with real-world applications, including those grounded in experiential learning, would improve their engagement. Keep that in mind as we get to some future Teach Access projects. 81% of students said it's important or very important for institutions to incorporate company-led projects to mimic real-world work. That's a tough thing to say. I try and say it where you're at, real-world work. And then the last one here, the main factors driving students toward a particular major were their interests in the field. That was 57%, career opportunities, 46%, and their ability to make a positive impact in that field, 41%. So, okay, so we've seen there's a gap. Companies are looking for students, recent graduates with these skills still today. And we're seeing that students are interested in learning things that will help them understand what's happening in the real world. I mean, none of this is super groundbreaking, right? I mean, this is why we're in education. We want to support and prepare students for what's ahead. So, all right, we've talked about all these things, and it's like, well, cool, how could we do this? How can we teach accessibility? Guess what? Here we are, Teach Access. So up on the screen right now, I have the Teach Access vision, and I'll read that out. And it's Teach Access envisions a future where technology is born accessible and inclusive for all. And to give you a little more information about who we are, we're a small nonprofit organization. We were founded in 2016 as a collective group of volunteers coming from industry, higher ed, disability advocacy nonprofit groups, addressing this accessibility technology skills gap. And since 2016, we've grown in a number of ways, always supported by a wide range of volunteers and members. We became an official 501c3 nonprofit organization in 2021. And that's when we really were able to start growing our staff. And so we now have 4 full-time staff, we have 2 student interns, along with those dozens of volunteers and members who help us continue working towards this vision, which is imagine a world where people are getting ready to create a product or a service at an organization, a company, and from the beginning, there's someone at the table or some people saying, hey, let's make sure we make this accessible and make sure we include people with disabilities in that work from the beginning so that we don't get to the end and realize, whoops, we didn't do it. So that's what we're working towards, I should say. We have a number of activities and programs, and you certainly can find out much more information about all of these on our website if you go to teachaccess.org. And we can drop that link for you as well at the end, or I see some chat numbers going up, so I'm guessing my team here is helping me out. So there's a lot that we're doing to address or to attempt to address, work to address how to close this skills gap. So we have some current and ongoing programs that you all out there are welcome to be a part of, welcome to join, and for your students as well. The first one is Study Away. So if you think of the concept of study abroad, study away is that students remain in the country. Prior to the pandemic in 2018 and 2019, we took students out to Silicon Valley near the Bay Area, and they spent a week learning from and being at organizations, tech companies like Google, Facebook, now Meta, Adobe, etc., learning about what is accessibility, what does it look like to do this work at these organizations. Since the pandemic, it's been a virtual program, which allows us to reach a lot more students, of course. Eventually, absolutely, we will get back to doing this in person, but the virtual program is free. So your students are highly encouraged to join us, and you can find more information on our website about that. We also have a faculty grants program, recognizing when we're thinking about how to support faculty to teach about accessibility, time is a very precious resource for faculty. And so the faculty grants program is our attempt to recognize that and provide funding to faculty to be able to do this work. And so the faculty grants provide small stipends, typically used over a summer, so that faculty are able to consider and think about and design curricular items that they can infuse and include in a course they're already teaching. So our goal, is really wide adoption. And so we're not actively trying to go to universities or colleges and say, hey, make a course about accessibility or a major. Any of us who've worked in higher ed understand curricular committees take a long time. Creating new courses, there's a lot that goes into that. So what we're looking at is how can we maybe meet faculty where they are right now? If we offer a stipend for some time and to support faculty to create something that might work in a course they're already teaching, let's try it. And so we've been running this. We're about to launch our 5th call for proposals in the next coming months here, to open it up for faculty to apply and to provide ideas around what they're doing in their courses and how they might like to start to introduce and teach about accessibility in their course. As part of that, the curricular items that faculty are creating as part of sort of the whole faculty grants program is that they become open educational resources or OER, that are then put into our Teach Access curriculum repository, which is free and open. And this is a space where you as instructors can go and find slide decks, student project prompts, other sorts of resources that you can use for free in your course. Maybe you want to tweak it a little bit, something like that. Certainly you can. We have Creative Commons licenses on those. But the idea is really, here's a head start. So you've listened today, or you've thought about it another time that you want to teach these topics. Maybe this will be the little help that could get you going. So we have this curriculum repository that will continue to grow and expand in various ways. Back to a program for students again, we have the Career Development Series. And so both the Career Development Series and the Study Away are, if you think back to that Wiley survey where students are saying, we want real world experiences and we want immersive experiences. This is one of our other series to provide that space for students. And the Career Development Series is more focused on what it sounds like. And so we've had, it's been all virtual. We've had people from various companies come in and talk, from disability advocacy nonprofits, someone from the US Department of Labor Office of Disability and Employment Policy, or ODEP, ODEP for short, have come in and talked to students about career readiness and career preparedness, what might be useful on a resume, how might you want to talk about the skills that you have, what types of skills, especially from our Department of Labor colleague, are interesting, what are the trends right now in hiring. So that's a free series for students as well. And then we have an accessibility hiring skills toolkit. This is aimed at sort of this pipeline idea. So I've talked a little bit about some of the stuff we have available to faculty, some of the things we have available specifically to students, but then recognizing, okay, so if we think about this accessibility technology skills gap, how do we help support companies to attract those students who've maybe started to learn about these things? And so there's a team of people, a project team of volunteers at Teach Access who are looking at this toolkit idea. And there's about a dozen or so sort of common entry-level jobs, front-end developer, graphic designer, project manager, thinking about what a lot of companies are hiring for recent graduates. We have a list of skills that you could add to your job posting to highlight what might be useful in thinking about accessibility skills, as well as some sample interview questions. So you've put it on the interview, but then how do you ask about it? How do you talk about it? Especially in organizations where maybe there's a hiring manager separate from your team. And so that's a free toolkit that we have available. So these are things we've been doing, among others. And then coming soon, we have some more, yay. We have a faculty fellowship program that we're piloting right now. So faculty grants, if you can think of those as kind of like a one-time infusion of cash, if you will, to support you in getting going. The fellowship program is aiming to be a longer engagement, maybe over the course of an academic year moving forward, but it's a place where we're really able to, in a sustained way, work with faculty, understand what their needs are, and provide training and support to be able to teach about accessibility. We're piloting in that right now, with plans to scale that up and continue to grow it in future years. And in a similar way, a student ambassador network. So, we've talked about some specific programs that we have available for students, but thinking about the student ambassador network, a series of clubs, if you will, across universities and colleges, where we could be continuing to provide resources and support to students as they learn about these things. So that was a lot to share about Teach Access. Let me take a drink of water here. So that's what we're doing, and you're all invited. But as we think about how you could start to raise awareness in your own communities, I'm just going to do a time check. Okay. I encourage you to be an advocate too. And if you don't know what that means or how, Teach Access is here. You join us. We can help with that. But maybe you're in a space where you're already thinking, here's some things I could try. I have a list up here. This is something that I used to refer to a lot, that I kind of developed over time in working with faculty at Michigan State. I kind of call them methods of appeal for your own networks, or things to get you caring. I shouldn't say caring. Things to get you maybe more active in teaching accessibly, but also could be teaching accessibility. So if there are any of you out there who maybe are in, actually, no, I'll pause there. But all of that to say, here are some things that I've seen be successful in the past for encouraging either your colleagues to start getting interested and more involved in this work, or for yourself. But thinking about student success, as we do things in the name of accessibility, whether that's teaching accessibly or teaching accessibility, it's thinking about our students and their success. Any of us, I could probably take a guess, any of us in education care about students. I mean, that's why we're in education. We want to support students. We want to prepare them for the world ahead. And so as we think about creating more inclusive learning environments, more accessible spaces, that helps them be more successful in whatever way they define their success. And likewise, teaching them about accessibility helps them with whatever success looks like for them after they leave. Of course, many people are also really interested in these concepts of disability equity and inclusion, or DEI. I know there's any number of ways for people to use that acronym. But as you're thinking about your work in those spaces, is disability included in that? Are you thinking about, so if you're thinking about social justice, are you thinking about disability justice? Are you including that in the work that you're doing around creating inclusive classrooms or beyond and beyond? Universal design for learning. So this is probably a little bit more tied to the teaching accessibly aspect of thinking about how you're creating your learning experiences for your students, and the ways that they're able to share their learning back to you. What does that look like? There's a whole bunch of information out there around UDL for short. Thinking about community impact. So maybe a little bit tied to the first two bullet points of student success and social justice. What mark do you want to leave on your community? How do you want to think about the ways that you're creating these learning experiences for students in your classrooms, as well as when they go out? What impact can you start to think about that you might have on students, so that as they go out to do their work, they're carrying this with them? The last two up here I have are legal and business. These are not the ones I like to lead with. I don't think that this, as we're talking about disability and accessibility, I don't think, scare tactics or talking about the threat of being sued is any way to motivate someone to want to do this work. However, sometimes at certain levels, if you're trying to get maybe your administrators on board or higher levels within the university, this is what might make them pay attention at first and then open the door to other ways to talk about it. So thinking about, well, if we're doing things, especially around teaching accessibly and making sure we're creating accessible environments, does that maybe help us think about the legal aspect? And same with business. Again, we're not doing this work because making things more accessible means we'll make more money. However, the disability community has huge purchasing power. And there's been, studies out there that also they're, again, not speaking for the whole community, but that they can sometimes be very loyal to an organization who shows true care around being accessible. And so as we think about what that means for our universities, What message does it send when a student wants to apply to attend your university and that portal is inaccessible? Does that mean, well, first of all, they can't apply, but what message does that send for how their experience might be once at the university and beyond? So there's all these sorts of things that we can think about, where we can be an advocate from where we're at. All right, I have gotten to this point of the what now. I've thrown a lot of stuff at you. I see there's some stuff in the chat, so I'll be excited to see if there's questions in there. But what now? Again, I want to call back to these two big pieces that came out of that WCET conference, that anything I've said or anything that you're thinking about should absolutely include people with disabilities. We should not be doing this work if we don't have people with disabilities, disabled people working alongside us. And the other is to make sure that we think about being proactive and starting to include this from the beginning. It might take a minute at first if this isn't common practice for you, but eventually it just kind of becomes one more step. Oh yeah, I got to run this through the accessibility checker, my syllabus, before I send it out this semester. So there's these small steps you can start to take that really set you up in the beginning. Oh, and also forgot I added this. I also used to say this to faculty at MSU. We're never like, quote, done with accessibility. It's not a checklist of like, I did all the things and now I'm done and I don't have to think about it again, because you might have done that. You might have made it accessible, but you will have a student come up to you and say, I can't access this thing. And in that moment, what do? You recognize that and you work with them to make it accessible. And so, I used to talk to faculty about how we can view it as a space for innovation in our teaching. How can we start to be more accessible from the beginning? And really, see this as a way to be innovative and how are we calling in and including a lot more students in what we're doing. And then, of course, you can always connect with Teach Access. We're here. We'd love to have you. And we can certainly talk through more of what that looks like. Okay. We made it. Thank you. Let me get out of my screen share here and come back. All right. I would love, it looks like we have about 9 minutes to take some questions here. Let me just scroll through the chat, see if there's questions.
There are
Thank
not
you to my team.
There are not currently any questions in the chat. Your team has been doing an awesome job putting in links. I'm happy if people want to type questions in the chat or even turn on your camera and ask questions in person. And if not, I have questions that I can ask, but I want to leave space for other people as well.
I also want to encourage, this is Kate speaking. If you do have a question and you would like it to be anonymous, please send it to Sam. Her label right there is UMass ATC. You can send it to her in a direct way and she'll be able to keep it anonymous. So if there's something you want to ask that way too.
Yes, and due to registration issues, there's 2 people in this meeting named Sam Delory who are not me. So don't send it to them, send it to UMass ATC, and that will be anonymous. I guess while people are thinking of questions, one thing that I would like to ask is, we had yesterday a panel where a student asked if they wanted to understand accessibility more, what classes should they be looking into? And that was addressed in one way, but I'm curious from your perspective and your role, what your answer to that would be. If you were a college student looking to understand accessibility better, whether that's to get into a tech field or to just generally have more knowledge, what fields do you recommend?
This is Kate speaking. A phenomenal question. And the short answer is it depends, because it would depend on first what institution you're attending. I could make the assumption it was a UMass student because here we are as part of Digital Equity Week, because it's different at different institutions. There are some universities in the US who have full programs around accessibility or assistive technology. Some institutions have no classes specific to that. So that's the short answer. But the longer answer in terms of different types of disciplines, I highly recommend if you have a disability studies department on your campus or are able to enroll in a disability studies course, absolutely. I mean, that really would provide such a grounding and understanding of why we do accessibility work and what it looks like. Other fields that you might find courses could be within computer science, could be within human computer interaction or HCI, could be user experience fields or UX, design courses. So there could be graphic design courses. I'm trying to think through some others. I've even seen some who maybe start to approach some of these topics in entrepreneurship classes. So thinking through where students might be experiencing creating a product or prototyping, something to that effect. So yeah, those would be on-campus courses, I'm thinking. And then there's certainly other things out there. If you can't find what you're looking for on your own campus, there are MOOCs or MOOC, massive open online courses. University of Illinois has a really good one. Speaking of University of Illinois, they have a graduate certificate that focuses on accessibility policy. So it's really, this is what we're attempting to try and do in Teach Access, is how can we give a better answer to this question of, oh, well, a lot of people are teaching about it in many classes, not just this one class over here. So that was a long answer, but it's kind of a long answer right now. Hopefully that was helpful.
I think it was very helpful. I will draw your attention in the chat. You were asked by fake Sam Delory if they can connect with you, and your team put in both your email address and your LinkedIn. So
beautiful. And I see, sorry, this is Kate speaking. I see in that there was the comment, something about primary school. So right now, Teach Access has been focused in higher ed. A lot of that just has to do with our capacity in terms of the size of our team and what we were able to handle up until now, at least. As we move forward, we absolutely are thinking about how can we get in to support teachers and students in K-12 spaces, because students are learning about design and computer science even before they get to college. Of course they are. And so how can we be supporting those spaces? So we're not there yet, but in the future.
So I know that Teach Access does partner with higher education. If there are people in K through 12, can they join at this point, or are you waiting for the future for that?
That's a really good question. I think I would love to have a conversation with them. We're a little better positioned now than we were even 6 months ago to kind of figure out what that looks like. I would say for any of those student programs that I talked about that are free and open and virtual, if a high school junior found it and wanted to apply to attend a virtual session, we wouldn't bar them from entry or stop them. So that's more of a student-based thing. But yeah, what I know is that I don't know a lot about K-12. It hasn't been my experience or my background, and I know for us to be able to start to support those spaces, we need a better understanding of what's happening and what's needed there. And so that's where I would love to have those conversations with what we could do now.
Awesome. Just looking at the time, I want to
Mhm.
see if anyone has one final question. A lot of pressure to put on somebody, but put it out there. We've got a couple minutes left. And while we wait to see if anyone has a question, I just want to thank you so much for joining us this week. It has been a really impactful week on our campus, and it's been amazing to connect with you. I'm really grateful for your time today.
Yes, this is Kate. Thank you so much, Sam. I really appreciate it. Really appreciate what you've been doing here. That's my cat.
I can't hear her, so.
Okay, good. Getting louder.
Okay. In lieu of further questions, it seems like there's none. I will just encourage people. Tomorrow is our final day of Digital Equity and Inclusion Week at UMass. Tomorrow morning, I'm going to be doing a live virtual session on using the WAVE Accessibility Evaluator tool. So come join us for that at 10 in the morning. And then from 2 to 4 in the library, we're having a celebration for disability and accessibility, what we've done so far on campus, where we're moving in the future, and there'll be food, and come join us and hope to see. You don't have to stay from 2 to 4. You can drop in and out. I will be there the whole time shoving brownies in my face, but whatever other people want to do, just checking again for other questions. I don't see any, so thank you so much, Kate. I'm very, very grateful, and thank you everybody who came today.
Thank you, everyone.